All right. As I am responding to the backstage script, as I alluded before, For those who are still having their last sips, please do that quickly and quietly so that we can commence. I know that I'm not fond of long written documents, but today I chose to do one. And so let's start earlier so that I'll be able to not waste time. Distinguished colleagues, valuable guests, allow me to, from the onset, establish a protocol which the presenters and participants may confidently glide on throughout the proceedings of the day. We gather here mindful of the intellectual and institutional mandate upon which this event stands. We do acknowledge in absentia our Chancellor, Dr. Vuyo, whose association with the iconic declaration, "I'm an African," continues to anchor debates on African Renaissance and its rebirth in our continent. The intellectual, political, and cultural life circulates and embraces it. Their statement and the broader African Renaissance project is symbolized and symbolizes, reminds and is mindful of the past, the present, and the future, which is deeply inculcated and interconnected with the scholarship such as this one. So we must be very thankful for that. We do really acknowledge and are accountable to that because it lives and governs many struggles that the continent is facing. We acknowledge in absentia again our principal and vice chancellor, Professor Pule Lingabula, whose articulation of the 10 catalytic niche areas that guide the university continue to support students on extracurricular activities. And such is the one that this lecture is really anchored on and supports. Holistical development of our students and catering the institutional culture and artistic expression as well as talent and its curiosity cannot be detached from this 10th catalytic niche area. We extend our appreciation to the Executive Dean of the College of Human Sciences, Professor Zethu Nkosi, under whose auspices and curatorship this Africa Speaks lecture is hosted. Kodwa ngifanele ngishiye ngesiqhakazelo yazi. Ngizosifuna ngizosiletha. Okay, through the College of Human Sciences, Africa Speaks is going to maybe embrace many of our thoughts and questions. We also acknowledge the respectable professors and doctors who are attending in situ and ex situ, as well as those who are attending online. We really are with you. We do understand that not being present in this room means that you are in absentia and not present. We do really embrace your presence. For we are a growing community, especially centered and around this very Africa Speaks. With this acknowledgement made, it is my honor to serve as the program director of the Africa Speaks lecture, an interdisciplinary activity that brings together African scholars, intellectuals, and emerging researchers, I'm one of them, to be able to engage and converge in these very discussions. This platform invites us to critically engage the continent's layered histories, layered historiography, history as well, and layered intervention and discussions, which continue to emerge each day when we live on the continent. Africa Speaks is a distinguished activity. And for us to be present here, we are very valuable. To be taking, that means listen attentively and respond constructively. I just need to say to everybody present here, I will be cueing Professor Zethu Nkosi to the podium. But before I do that, I just need to speak to the backstage screen on my side that cues me to respond to the multimedia team to play a CHS video. Just watch how proud we are with these very achievements and activities that we are doing. Over to you.
Shaped by by disruption, inequality, and opportunity. Humanity needs more than knowledge. It needs wisdom, entrepreneurship, leadership, and innovation. Welcome to the College of Human Sciences at the University of South Africa, where knowledge drives transformation and education transforms lives. As the largest and most diverse academic environment within the university, the College of Human Sciences is a dynamic ecosystem of teaching, research, and community engagement. Our focus is on studying culture, identity, faith, health, and history. Our college is a vast landscape of expertise, housing 18 departments and 3 specialized schools, from psychology, sociology, and social work to communication science, religious studies, and information science. We explore the roots of our existence through anthropology, archaeology, and history, while shaping the future through political studies, philosophy, and modern languages. Here, we don't just study how the world works. We shape how humans live, think, and relate to one another, rooted in the soil of Africa, but connected to the global stage. CHS embraces decolonized and inclusive knowledge. We are one of the most productive research colleges at Unisa, home to a high number of NRF-rated researchers conducting groundbreaking work in African knowledge systems, digital humanities, and gender justice. Our identity is unapologetically African. We honor indigenous knowledge and promote multilingualism, acting as a bridge between the heritage and innovation. We align with Unisa's vision to shape Africa's intellectual futures and contribute to the global scholarship from a uniquely African vantage point. Our mission is simple yet powerful: to empower students with knowledge that matters, knowledge that heals and builds, knowledge that restores dignity and drives social justice. At CHS, education goes beyond a certificate on a wall. We prepare our graduates to be entrepreneurial leaders who influence policy, preserve our collective heritage, and foster meaningful communication in a fragmented world. As we navigate the 4th Industrial Revolution, CHS is at the forefront of digital transformation. We approach digitalization differently. We don't just ask how technology works, we ask who it works for. Our role is to humanize technology, ensuring that artificial intelligence, data science, and automation serve the needs of society. As a leader in open distance and e-learning, we are building a future where access and technology work hand in hand to bridge the digital divide. We are actively contributing to Unisa's catalytic niche areas, from pioneering feminist, womanist, and Bosadi theorizations to advancing public health and mental wellness research. Our work is socially accountable. We have moved out of disciplinary silos and into cross-cutting scholarship that addresses the pressing issues of our time, from climate ethics to social cohesion. Every CHS graduate carries more than a degree. They carry a purpose. Our alumni are the heartbeat of our communities. They are the counselors, educators, policymakers, and social workers. They are the theologians, media experts, archivists, and leaders serving in government and NGOs across the globe. They don't just find jobs, they transform society. The College of Human Sciences, University of South Africa, inspiring minds, transforming society, shaping the future.
Yes, indeed, that deserves a round of applause. Thank you very much. That's what we are proud of. That's who we are, and we are very grateful under the curatorship of Professor Nkosi as the executive team and the subordinate of the deanery that is going through all this thick and thin to see that this college is very, very prosperous. And we have certain departments that are very much significant. And then to our audience, I just need to invite you to engage openly, respectfully, and I ask you to ask rigorous questions that are going to make this discussion very much variable. I before I cue in Professor Nkosi, I just need to acknowledge someone present here in the room who is my mentor on public address, Prof. Sekgalo. Thank you very much for that. Prof. Nkosi, izozozamkele ekhaya, ma'am.
Molweni. Hi, let us be lively, guys. How? Dumelang? Absheni? Dimasheroni ne? Sanbonani? Goeiemorgen, Professor. Yes, colleagues, thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you very much, Program Director. We are the College of Human Sciences because of you. Give yourself a round of applause. Members of College Management Committee, esteemed colleague and fellow academics, our distinguished keynote speaker, Professor Divine Few, am I pronouncing right? Fu. Postgraduate students, artists, curators, and community partners, our invited guests. May I thank the Africa Speaks Committee. I think people need to see who is doing this great work, led by Ms. Mukhupi. May I see them? They're not here, but those that are here, so that we say thank you. Yes, we are really grateful for your hard work. And then now it seems as if there is a common denominator that will be thanked after each and every speaker. Professor Sekgalo, Chair of Albert Luthuli Research Chair, she's very supportive in what we do, and we appreciate Prof. Sekgalo. We might not say it every day, but we are really grateful for your support. It's a genuine privilege to open this edition of Africa Speaks. There is something quietly remarkable about a room like this one, a room full of scholars, students, artists, and community partners who are here not simply to listen, but to think together. That, in essence, is what this lecture series was created to do. Let me just remind you of where this initiative comes from. We need just to thank Professor Rosemary Moketsi, because it was her initiative when she joined the College of Human Sciences as a dean, and she identified where the college was lacking, and she came up with this strategic project called Africa Speaks. The Africa Speaks lecture series was born as the African Visiting Scholar Lecture Series. It was established in 2008, which means this project is, 18 years old. 18 years old if we started in 2028, because it's 2016. And ambitious. It was to strengthen the research capacity of the college and to place our academics in sustained critical conversations with African intellectuals across the continent and throughout the diaspora. Nearly 2 decades later, that vision still animates everything we do. Our aim has always been to nurture and sustain a vibrant community of researchers connected to Africa and its diaspora, a community innovative in its quest for truth and committed to contributing to universal knowledge from the vantage point of a developing African state. This is not a slogan we recite. It's a mission as a College of Human Sciences that we are accountable to. And so I want to remind you about why series like this matters. For too long, African ways of knowing, our histories, our memory, our oral traditions, our visual and material cultures have been treated as peripheral to the so-called universal. Africa Speaks refuses that arrangement. It insists that the ways of remembering, theorizing, and expressing that arise from African diasporic experience are not ornamental to global knowledge. They are indispensable to it. This is the work of improving African scholarship in the most practical sense. It means recovering what has been suppressed, reinterpreting what has been misread, and repositioning African voices that dominant knowledge systems have pushed to the margins. It means recognizing that knowledge is never neutral and that a series of engagement with this continent must hold together both the legacies of colonialism and apartheid and the long, proud histories of resistance, creativity, resilience, and institution building that define us. It also means refusing disciplinary silos. The questions confronting African societies today, which is migration, digital technologies, cultural erasure, ecological crisis, social justice, do not respect the boundaries between history and philosophy, between anthropology and information science, between arts and critical theory. The College of Human Science has always understood that art is itself a site of knowledge and production, and that scholarship gives us a language to interpret. It historicizes and carry forward the memories that art holds. Thought and feeling, image and word, they belong together. This brings me with real pleasure to our keynote speaker, who will be delivering a lecture titled The Time of the Macabre, Notes on Technology and the Re-spectularity of Violence. Professor Few will be introduced by our program director, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this occasion. Before I hand over, allow me for just a few shots of invitations which are appropriate, and I think to an academic setting, we can say to my colleagues in the College of Human Sciences, may this lecture renew our commitment to scholarship, that it at once intellectually rigorous and socially accountable, rooted in African archives, communities, and creative practices. To our postgraduate students, see yourself not as spectators, but as participants in an evolving Pan-African research communities. You carry both the capacity and the responsibility to shape the institutional cultures that comes after us. To our artists and practitioners, may this program affirm that your work is central to our understanding of African intellectual life, never ancillary to it. To our guests from beyond the university, may Africa Speaks show you an academy that can be responsive, dialogical, and genuinely collaborative. A place where African knowledge is generated, debated, and shared in ways that matter well beyond this campus. Colleagues, the real challenge before us is not to make today memorable, but to make it consequential. To let this be a catalyst for enduring transformation in how we teach, how we research, and how we build institutions long after the lights in the hall go down. Africa Speaks invites us, quietly simple, to listen to the full multiplicity of African voices, and then to reconfigure our practices, our curricula, and our institutes in response. It is now my honor to welcome you, Prof. I will start with Dr. Musako because he needs to introduce our keynote speaker. But colleagues, you are all welcome. Let's give ourselves a round of applause.
Thank you very much once more, Prof. Zethu, for usamukela ekhaya. Sizothi izinja zizokhokota emuva zibophe zonke. Okay, siyabonga. Okay, the lecture that is to be delivered by Prof. will, among other elements, touch on the actionable knowledge that speaks to the lived realities and aspirations of African societies. Now I'll introduce our guest speaker. Prof. is currently Director of HUMA, the Institution for Humanities in Africa at the University of Cape Town, where he is also a social anthropologist. He previously served as Director of Publications and Dissemination at the Council for the Development of Social Science Research in Africa from the second millennium, 17, to the second millennium 19, he joined UCT later in 2012. From the University of Basel, where he was a researcher within the research and methodology at the Institution of Sociology. His research focuses on political suffering and smiling, interrogating how urban youth navigate and seek dignity in the midst of structural hardship. His field spans from Botswana, Cameroon, through Senegal to South Africa. His current work turns on the political economy of Pan-African knowledge production and the ethics thereof. The theme and the acute relevance of the integration of programs of intellectual ambition remains to be the core of his focus study. Prof. holds a degree from the University of Beu in Cameroon, the University of Botswana, Kgorong, and the University of Basel, Switzerland. His intellectual scholarly engagement focuses on visiting fellow at the Center of Modern Orientation Studies in Berlin, guest scholar, African Studies Center, Leiden, visiting lecturer, University of Basel, Tokyo, and Gastonberger. Teaching appointments at the University of Basel, Cape Town, as well as Western Cape and Stellenbosch, among others. Prof. is the founding managing editor of Langa Research Publishing and has served as chair of Council of Management of African Books Collective and is current co-chair of Global Group. He's still there, and World Universities Network. His presence as keynote speaker at our institution makes us to be one of his footprint structure. So wherever he will be traveling, will be carried with him. Prof, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do you project?
I think you have it. I don't want to use this. I need to read from here.
So you'll tell me.
Yes, yes. Oh, if you have something I can use. Do you have a remote I can use? Okay, no problem. No problem, yeah. Good morning. Dumelang. Yeah, good morning, good morning. And again, thank you for the introduction. I really appreciate, and also the work that you've done. And also I thank Professor Nkosi for not just the welcome, but also the hosting. And to also thank my sister Adobahang for such extraordinary hospitality. I was just saying that it's, you know, we travel the world a lot, and when you are a Black African scholar, you encounter the world in a particular way, you know. So hospitality is not something that you're very used to when you cross borders internationally, but as we see locally on the continent, you know, so it is harder to be an African in Africa than even in Europe, as you will know, as you travel. So really, thank you very much for making it possible that somebody can pick you up from your home, can take you to an airport. When you come, there's somebody to receive you, and you can have food. And we used to going to places where people say, you're invited, but spend your money. You know, and then after you have to spend the next 10 years claiming one document after the other. I think many people are used to that, you know. It's a challenge of scholarship, you know, on the continent. So it's important to acknowledge people who see you, you know, for that. So thank you very much. And thank you, my friend and sister Puleng. We always say big Puleng and small Puleng because we always dealing with the two pullings all the time with the work that we are doing on the Africa Charter and African knowledge production, and also just trying to find ways of having to give dignity to our work. Sometimes we think we are knowledge producers until when you encounter other places and you discover that your job is just to apply. So it's really good to be doing that work with you, and it's also good to see many people and friends, including my big brother Laurent on that side, and my sister Sane, who we're very happy that you left Cape Town and you're at Unisa. And we do hope that you will make us proud, And thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for being here. When I was invited, I couldn't say no. I had to say yes. I mean, I always like to come to Unisa, but also it's family and it's friends. So the talk today is about violence. That's very important. When you leave this room and there is one thing that you want to think about, and one thing you need to remember, you must remember that, thank you, it is about violence, and many ways about it. About political violence, social violence, cultural violence. It is the thing that is in our lives today that we cannot escape in many ways. We are in a country which tries as much as possible to fight that violence in many different ways, in the public sphere, in the private sphere, in homes, outside of homes. So it is something we all struggle with. So the talk today is about violence. I've entitled it The Time of the Macabre. And it's just some preliminary notes on the technology, which is really central. I mean, the presentation of the school and the faculty is really around technology and knowledge production. And the second, which is the concept of spectacularity, which is a spectacle of violence. And what I have emphasized here is the re-spectularity of violence. It's, as you see, I'm taking it from Michel Foucault and his book about on discipline, and power. I just came from a few weeks back from Uppsala, where Foucault spent some time, and it was great, to be reconnected and to see the kinds of things that inspired him to write what he was writing about, in space. But it's about the re-spectularity, and the re-spectularity, which is really bringing back to the fore a particular mode of expressing violence that we have hidden for a long time, that we have tried to keep to the back. So when you leave this place, you should remember one message is that we have gotten to a time where we have normalized violence, and where we've normalized the spectacle of violence, and where the spectacle of violence is what has become part of our everyday life. So but it comes from work that I have done for many, many years. So I come from Cameroon, from a place in the Cameroon grass field called Bafut. As you see in my background, I've studied across several countries, from Botswana, did my master's, in Switzerland where I did my PhD. But at each level, I studied something different, when we grew up, they would always ask you, what do you want to do, in the future, as if we have agency, The thing about belonging to a part of the world that is called underdeveloped is that your life is shaped by coincidences. The predictability of having to decide that tomorrow I'm going to become this is something that you cannot really afford. So you have to jump to opportunities that you have, So I started off with journalism, mass communication, and political science, which is where I also developed my love for research. And also to understand the state, to understand militaries to understand violence and lots of other things. Then I went to Botswana and I did sociology and development studies, where I became very disappointed with development and wanted to have nothing to do with development. And it was in Botswana where I really got to do work around sexuality, which I'm presenting tomorrow. And then in Switzerland, I studied masculinities and youth and the state, particularly how young people find ways of surviving, you know, in a place that doesn't have one for them. Like we're seeing today, the guy who picked me up was telling me how much he is the top in maths. But maths cannot make him a billionaire or a millionaire in his perspective. He tries all equations, but all he sees is on TV lots of people who are becoming millionaires, and he's spending a lot of time studying maths, you know. So the work I was doing was really trying to understand that, you know, how young people imagine and move to this new future. But this is important, so you understand what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do, how do I move it? What I'm trying to do is based on the space that I'm working in, that's HUMA, the Institute for Humanities in Africa, which I started heading in 2020, just before COVID, and during which I also became very interested in many things. The first talk I proposed was on decolonization. So just to say decolonization is at the foundations of what we do, what I do. It's shaped by so many different works, so many different texts that some people would have seen before. But it's really, I'm particularly interested in the ways in which we move from the abstract to the concrete. How do we translate these abstract ideas that we have about change, you know, to everyday life? And how do we understand the human condition, you know? And can these so-called, what we call decolonial frameworks help us to understand the human condition? So much of what we've done is taken us through how to understand Africans, how to understand the subaltern. This is just long histories. We've worked with Puleng on the Africa Charter, which has given us this concentric circle, which helps us to understand that what we see on the surface is not necessarily what occurs, that in order to understand something, you need to go deeper into it. They are always like onions that you have to peel, and that to bring change, you have to change it at the formal, informal, at the systemic, non-systemic. So the ideas that we have translate to everyday life. That's what I'm trying to show. They are not just abstractions, as we always seem to do. But how do this translate to today and the work that I'm trying to do? So we are living in a context that is a very troubled and troubling context, you know, and I have listed a set of 9 areas that I think shape the context in which we are located. I think the first is just the end of shared values, the end of community. You know, I was hearing the other day somebody said, it's the end of Ubuntu, you know. You know, we've come to a context where we are facing extinction, not necessarily because, not just because of climate change and others, but because the shared values that we thought we had, that when we subscribe to something such as democracy or to something such as independence, and we belong to the world, to whether it's the United Nations or wherever, that we will have the same values. But we are beginning to see that in that space, we are losing respect, we are losing dignity. There are hierarchies of humanities, that some people belong, some people do not belong. So we are no longer aspiring to these shared values, which holds us together. So that's one challenge. The other is what I term the end of this euphoria of modernity that we have. That we used to think that when you subscribe to modernity, it automatically improves your life, you know? When you have a democratic context, it automatically brings equality and others. But we're seeing that we are living in contexts that are so unequal that you can claim that you have democracy, you can claim that you go to elections and vote and others don't, but still you're so unequal, you know? So the projects such as capitalism, projects such as development, projects such as modernity and democracy, which were supposed to bring about thriving, are collapsing. We are seeing this widening of this gap that is happening today, the wealth gap. The second is, or the third is the era of toxic polarizations and extremisms. Everything now has become extremist. Whether you're on the right, you're on the left, you're on the middle, we have become very fundamentalists in the ways in which we articulate, in the ways in which we engage, in the ways in which we describe the world, our relationships. So it's almost like the unleashing of hate and the unleashing of violence, and in fact the unleashing of bigotry. So we see bigotry everywhere. You can stand up, you can talk, you can hate, and you can justify it, and it's possible. And we'll have to spend time trying to negotiate with you why you hate. You stand up, you say, women are bad, you hate them. You stand up and you say queer people are bad, you hate them. You come back and you say Cameroonians are bad, you hate them. So we are in a state where we have normalized hate. And it's not just here, it's global. Wherever you go, these extremisms and these fundamentalisms have become embedded in our lives, whether you are a believer or non-believer, Muslim or Christian. So it is this era of polarizations and extremisms. And they're possible because it's also the time of dictatorships. Every place is trying to change a constitution so that presidents have no term limits. Every place. It's not just here. And we're seeing these dictatorships even translate to everyday life, even to our own private spheres, that people can just give you instructions and you must implement, We're losing this a space where we need to negotiate. We don't have the patience for negotiation any longer. And we have liberated what I think Mbembe and others call necropolitics, but it's now become in the private hands, because since violence is no longer the monopoly of the state, it is now in the hands of almost everybody. Somebody can stand up, I don't like you, shoot you, or stand up, I don't like you, beat you up, So it is this era of these dictatorships which has become anarchy, and also the time, as some would say, of oligarchies. And as we say, it's a time of states of exception. This is the work that Agamben had done some time back, but it's really about the delegitimation of rights frameworks. Rights have become very contextual. We're almost going back to the Roman era where citizens are just those who in the city have rights, Rights have become very contextual, and we are revising one right instrument after the other to ensure that rights become a privilege for particular people in particular places. And it's not just local, it is global. In almost every place you go to, you're seeing this delegitimation and undermining of relevant rights instruments, and where people are constantly declaring the states of exceptions and exemptions. Even in places such as Europe, which were places which were leading this task for or human rights, as they used to say. But it is possible because of what we call the end of truth or the end of science, which you have seen everywhere, that 150 characters on social media platform is more important than 400 pages of a scientific work, and that science, like people say, people are becoming more and more clever. In fact, to tell somebody that you don't be too academic about this issue is a very good insult, So we are seeing that academic work, which is at the heart, and whose really project is to constantly interrogate and search for truth, is losing its place. And when we lose that place, we are obfuscating this search for truth. And therefore, academia is losing its place, the diminution of the academy and academic knowledge, and this systemic pursuit of truth. And when we stop searching for truth, it means that we then move into an era where claims become more important than anything. So you can stand up and say, divine is a goat, and you don't need to show that divine is a goat, divine is a God, we have to believe that divine is a God, So this project of interrogating is not there. And what this is leading to is this dangerous space where we're facing this challenge of polarization. And as we've seen from the work of many organizations, that polarization is a hyper problem today. It's our number one a problem. It is what is pushing societies, to extreme. Why I'm saying this is because technology, which is the next problem, comes into this. Technology comes into this, particularly smart technology, and particularly artificial technology. The project you're running is a project around archives. The project you're running is a project around Pan-Africanism. The project you're running is about knowledge production. But when the archives that exist are already archives of hate, what does it mean to be taking these archives seriously, Because in archives is what Poleno Tonji will call this world that is always oriented towards somewhere else. In archives is what Valentine Mudimbe would call the colonial library. And the colonial library itself already contains, not just the knowledge, but the ways we see this knowledge, the ways we read this knowledge, the way we understand this knowledge, the way we interpret and explain this knowledge. So when we take these archives already seriously without critically asking questions, then what we're doing is just reproducing all of these issues that I have raised. So the project that I'm doing, or this paper that I'm presenting, is around this. So it's around this time of the macabre, this time of violence, this time of the normalization and re-spectularity of violence. And the macabre, which is a concept which comes from really far. It's not my invention, so that's very important, but it was a concept used to describe sometime in the medieval ages, which was really this dance of death, dance to death, and a death which consumes everyone, which makes no difference between the wealthy and the poor, which makes no difference between the person driving a Lamborghini and the one driving a small Toyota. This death which the equalizing nature of death. But the macabre itself is a concept which talks about something that is really horrific, something that is horror, that is gruesome, I grew up, I never really liked horror movies, I've always been stunned by the fact that, people spend their time paying money to go watch a movie with somebody going around hacking someone with blood, and they call it entertainment, I've never gotten myself to understand the ways in which horror becomes entertainment, so which is gruesome, which is grim, which is death, and the fact that over time we've come to normalize it as entertainment, whether you're watching somebody like, I've never really watched Dracula, and it's, of course, it's artistic and good critique, but just to understand that watching a movie where somebody is going around scaring people, is going around eating up people, is going around cutting heads, is going around shooting, going around spilling blood, that is entertainment, And it is this that I'm going back to this re-spectularity of violence, because the question is to try to understand the ways, or the means by which, or the process by which we have come to institutionalize this as a norm, and what this means for our everyday life, for our ordinary life, and our interactions with each other, and what this means for the silences that we have when we see this horror happening, and what this means for our relationship to some of these horror. So the title of the paper was constituted, or I started reflecting about it when we had this case in Kgorong where it was in March 2016, when this woman was pregnant, Monique Kumate, may her soul rest in peace, and struggled to make it to the hospital. But when she made it to one hospital through the other, she wasn't really attended to, but she then died, passed on. And when she passed on, because she was pregnant and about to give birth, her sister, mother, and others had to perform cesarean on her just outside of the mortuary, and in that process took out the babies, and it was so bloody, But what I found interesting and painful was not just that bloodiness. It was all the cameras that were surrounding this bloodiness. Everyone wanting to have the latest picture. Everyone wanting to have it live. Everyone wanting to project it. Everyone wanting to demonstrate what we have come to call citizen activism on the one hand, but at the same time, really, on the one side, violating this body, but also participating in this dance macabre that was just happening. And we see it in many ways, whether it is the people who are protesting and shambucking others, whether it is in train accidents or car accidents that happen, whether in all sorts of unfortunate things that are happening, that what is so exciting is all these cameras that are there, phones wanting to be live, wanting to be the latest, wanting to be liked, wanting to appear to be the person who are bringing information into the public sphere, but at the same time not attending to the basic thing that's happening, that is human life that is being lost there. And that is why I call the time of the macabre, because it is that time where over time we've come to normalize violence, we've come to normalize this suffering, we've come to be silent participants of it in particular ways. And technology plays a really key role in making that possible. Not just using technology to violate people, but that even in the process of having to make it visible, we often tend to even ignore the very thing we want to make very visible, which is suffering that is happening in a context. So the paper comes from a response to particular things. The first was a contribution to Francis Nyamjo's book, Eating and Being Eaten, and the idea that humanity exists because of mutual cannibalism, and trying to understand our relationship with each other, but our relationship with Europe, but also our relationship with interdependency and our relationship with hate and the end of conviviality. And that the world functions when we eat and open up ourselves to be eaten by other people, which is what he calls Ubuntu. But that when we eat and we do not open up ourselves to be eaten by others, that is where Ubuntu fails, But I was invited sometime back in 2018 to respond to Achille Mbembe's article in the 1990s on the post-colony, which is a really important article, which also led to the book on the post-colony. Some of you would have come across. I think these are some of the most cited and the most influential, texts and books, which I'm going to speak about just briefly. But this article was first written for that. But in that book and in that article, and also in the reflections that I have, also other texts, such as Mikhail Bakhtin's work, as particular around the spectacle, which is really important, and also around the carnival and carnivalesques, and Baudrillard's work on simulation and simulacrum, and the ways in which also what we consider as image becomes reality. The imagination also becomes reality. It's also around Frantz Fanon's work, particularly he has this, I always use both because I think the translations are not the same. Because I think le damné de la terre, which is, I like to emphasize the word damné. I don't think it's the same thing. I mean, Laura, you correct me, but it's not the same as the wretched of the earth. So there is a lot that is lost when it's translated as the wretched of the earth instead of the damned, or the condemned of the earth. So the power of the meaning is completely lost, but in the damné de la terre and the wretched of the earth, he has this concept which Titi Dagarem has used, which is the nervous condition. The nervous condition is really critical here because the nervous condition comes when you have this psychological war and you're torn between this new change that you're supposed to make, but maintaining, the old and living in the old system. And the necropolitics, which some of you would have come across, which is also continuation of Mbembe's work. And you have Agambem's work on states of exception, and also the thing about homosexual, which is all with Hannah Arendt's work, particularly the concept of the banality of evil, which of course is condemned, also critiqued a lot over time. But I think these are all important, to understand this condition in which we find ourselves in today, in which we have come to re-spectacularize violence, and in which we have come to locate ourselves back in this dance, Macabre. And the other is really all these publications on technologies and algorithms, particularly these algorithms of aggression, and the ways in which these technologies, even in the attempts to have to take us to a completely different space, actually becomes really tools for aggression, tools for oppression, and tools for violence. This particular work by Safia Noble is one of those, which I use a lot, the concept of the original sin, and that technology carries the original sin. And the original sin is the sin of creation. It's the sin, and once you create that technology, which is founded on particular versions of masculinity, that technology, which itself already depends on data that is collected through tools in the colonial library, that technology itself is already a tool of violence, So even when you deploy it, so our job is really to understand the ways in which that technology comes to institutionalize violence or come to facilitate this macabre a context in which we find ourselves, or this spectacularity of violence. But there are several things I want you to understand here. This is not mine. This is coming from other scholars who have summarized this, so I take no ownership for this. First is Achim Mbembe's work, and secondly, the summary is not mine. But it's just to understand what he's trying to do. He's working on a concept which idea that he calls the commandement. And again, in that work, and Laura, you could help me here, but the commandement, when they translate the post-colony, they have to keep the commandement as the commandement because you cannot translate it into English. Because when you translate it into English, it becomes command, and it commands commandment, But it is more than just command. It is also about government. It's also about violence, control, lots of other things. So if you just translate it as command, you miss out a lot. But what does the commandment do, and what are the characteristics, and why it's so important for us to have a look? It has the way the commandment operates also have a relationship on the ways in which massacres and genocides happen. So it's important for us to understand those. The first is really about the dramaturgy of power. How you assert your power and your dominance through the spectacle. So that's very important. That spectacle is an important part of this. The second is this banality of discipline, in which it becomes part of your daily routine, but through particular rules, but these rules really define your physical space, your body, your language, and the way you talk and talk about things, you know. The second is really this intimacy, and the third, this intimacy and complicity, which is partly what I think Anna Rand is writing about, the banality of evil, in the sense how normal people become parts of totalitarian systems, and how normal people, everyday people, become parts of violence, you know. And that subjects then participate in this through particular ways that they take for granted, you know, but they participate in this system. And then the last, which is really what he's talking about, which is about the grotesque and the carnivalesque, is the ways in which there are so many excesses in the ways in which these kinds of institutionalization of violence really happens, in debauchery, in buffoonery, in corruption, but in ways that are really visible and dirty in everyday life. So what I'm saying is that technology has become a tool in this process to facilitate the process of this banality. And when you go back, you know, to I'm going to skip this a little bit, to go back to this dance, this macabre, this context of the macabre, you cannot, you know, underestimate the ways in which technology have come to make it very easy to have to make this very possible. And here I want to take us back to Foucault and the distinction that he makes about the ways in which we move from spectacular punishment and public punishment to prisons, you know, to incarceration in prisons, which we think are more ethical. So I'm arguing here that technology has made it very possible and has made it easier for us to move this violence, for us to move the ethics that separates us with this violence to a place that it becomes more spectacular, but that we do it even more violently, but that we do not take the ethics of it. And I think if we are not careful, we are going to move to a place where we begin to become the things that we are avoiding to become. So I do think that it is the place for scholars to revisit, you know, these processes by which the commandement institutes itself, and the ways in which the commandement turns people into objects and tools for violence, and the ways in which this is inscribed into technology, and technology facilitates it for us to get to this place of dignity. And I think if we don't do that, what we are going to do is to become these participants in this dance macabre, you know. So we are back into this place of violence, not just but across, you know, the continent and across the world. And I do think that revisiting Foucault, revisiting back the questions Mbembe were asking, really helps us to resolve this banality of the macabre or violence that we are faced with, you know, today. Yeah, thank you. I think you can take it off.
All right, I was just being respectful, allowing the handshake to take place so that I can commence. All right, indeed, the lecture was locally grounded, regionally attuned, and globally resonant, contributing to the Unisa knowledge while being conscious of the development and the imperatives of our African status quo. Prof, thank you very much for that. Yeah, from me now to you. Yeah, okay. And I just need to say, allow me to thank Prof for all the vowels that appear in African names and surname must be A, E, I, O, U. Now I know. Prefer, thank you, for weaving the lecture in the manner that he did, and then strengthening the commitment for African-centered scholarship. At this moment, we'll be changing gears, spinning gusheshe, of course. Allow me to go into the question and answer session, which is commonly known as the interrogation and then the respondents or responses. So we may begin, but prior to that, allow me, dear colleagues, to look into the way Macabre has been phrased, the time of Macabre, using technology and then using the spectacularity of violence and referencing, of course, that's what Prof did, referencing Michael Foucault on the presence. And do we really acknowledge or not acknowledge, disagree or agree? That in that way we indicate how our lives are shaped by what we do and see in the existing planet. We do know that the Sustainable Development Goals have got an ambition and a vision to have the world united as a single village by the year 2030 and sharing valuable things. But what Prof indicated is that we need to not forget what Ubuntu is in the midst of modernity and polarized debates, and therefore looking to the context and the context of global issues in our living experience. For human beings to exist on planet Earth is such an interrogation, and whereby we realize that institutions are losing their grounds on whether there's a loss of academic knowledge or not, in the verge of AI being the generative AI in that manner. So the use of art, thanks for Prof, you talk to my heart, I'm an artist. Using art as a universal language in order to share the message, and then using art in an interpretative manner. So when we look at a picture, we can read silently different perspectives, of course. That's what Prof said. So you can either decide you become eaten or you eat. So being a participator with a cell phone during an act of violence, do you partake or contribute? Do you discourage or encourage? There's a very strong contest of discussion. But let me not be the one who spins the negotiation in this moment. Let it be the audience. There's a question of answer session is going to come. Prof, I'll ask you to come to sit here, of course, and then who else can I call upon to this podium? But let me just be respectful. Okay, as Prof is still coming, please cue in your questions, refine them, and let them be respectful, and then talk to the academic structure of our existence. Okay, backstage knowledge, am I coming? Okay, fine. So, Prof will be having questions directed to you, and to the audience, of course, and to the scholars in the room, professors and doctors here present. I will ask someone to assist me with the question and answer. Who can I pick and choose? I'm looking at someone who's busy typing. Yeah, exactly. Stand up, yeah. Velu will do that, yes. Velu, my eyes were just so cute on you, so glued on you. Thanks a lot for being assistant. All right, a breather as the questions come. But one of those is that, for me it's not a question, it's a great comment. Thanks for using art the way you use it. Thanks for considering the art elements in it. Thanks for looking at the composition. Thanks for looking at the message portrayed by the artist. And thanks for looking at what the artist does by the time he did the artwork. So there are many artworks that are done, and you used literature to capture the moment. You also used visuals to capture the moment. That very way, it talks to us that we are existing on planet Earth because we are all artists. We should just interpret exactly what we do every time. Really? Questions? Anyone raising hands? I've got you. Did I say Professor, my anchor? Okay. You be second. Yes.
Sorry. Hi.
Another hand, so that I can be able to keep tabs. Okay, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Name is Ndando Mlambo. My question would be your thoughts around the involvement of the nation states in the Macabre. I mean, Mbembe does mention in necropolitics sovereignty, and sovereignty being the decision on who lives and who dies. Your thoughts around perhaps the post-colonial state in Africa imploding and really choosing sovereignty as death as an option. Your thoughts on that?
Thanks, Ntando. Prof will respond to your question. Prof, the question came in the manner that I think resides along who lives and who dies in the issue of macropolitics. One can choose to save a situation by being a contributor or just take a cell phone and be the one who watches. So over to you, Prof. Am I quoting very well, Ntando? Sort of, eh? Yeah, good, I got it. The mic for Prof? Okay, several. Okay, it's fine. Okay. My Professor Busire.
Okay. No, thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Fu. Listening to you, it reminded me of a gathering that we had with Professor Skhalo at, I think it was VETS, and we were talking about, actually they were presenting about violence especially maternal kind of during birth. And it occurred to me that I never thought of it as violence, where the nurses will say things that were very rude to the mothers who are giving birth. And sometimes even there was one lady who stood up and told a story about how she even lost her baby in that process. And you've shown us graphics of violence, different types of violence. And I'm just wondering, is man violent by nature, or is it something that we inherit? Which one takes an upper hand, violence or goodness? Because do we have propensity to violence, or do we just, or are we forced by circumstances, or do we just generally lovers of violence? Because that will then tell us if it is the nature of man, and I mean man here doesn't mean a male, I mean man in total. From the times immemorial, we have seen that happening, that when you want to solve an issue, it is never diplomatic ways. People go into a violent kind of mode to solve an issue. Look at even in Middle East right now, we don't have oil because somebody woke up in the morning and said, I've got to go to the field to make sure that these people understand that I'm more powerful than them, or something to that effect. Is it inherent in us? And if it is inherent in us, how do we remove that which is inherent in us?
Thank you very much, Prof. Busire. Okay. I've got another question. You might go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, colleagues. My name is Pasaka Pamele from the Department of Anthropology and Archaeology. Prof, I'd specifically like to speak to 3 points that you made, which I think are very important, right? Comments and some can be questions. Specifically, the age of dictatorships. There's something that I call Bluetooth imperialism that I've seen or paid attention to with the United States, where they attempt to, or they control countries from a distance, right? And it is worrying because people do not identify that as control of a different country. We see it as, an extension of an imperial state. Specifically, we've seen it in Latin America, and we think that it's something that is going to consistently reoccur, because from the first time that the new administration in the United States started, they identified specific countries that they wanted to take over, specifically Greenland, Canada becoming a 30-something state, in Latin America with what I think is going to happen with Cuba, a similar thing that happened in Venezuela. What you start noticing is that these countries do not just want to overthrow a power, but to control it. specifically with what we saw in Venezuela. We see it in the Middle East with Iran. Luckily, Iran was able to defend itself. So I think that is a very important point that you were speaking to about the age of these dictatorships. And it is somewhat worrying because countries that should be standing up for these countries do not do anything about it. And going to point 2, which is very important, when you speak into technology, it's spread and normalization of these violences that we see. It is essential that we also link that to how technology in itself, specifically AI, like Kgorong that the United States uses, is used to commit these violences that get spread through phones as something that we get to normalize that this is the standard. Same thing that happened in Palestine. Whereby it became a norm to see children dying every day. So that it is essentially this same technology that is used to create the same violence, to identify specific places and targets. That's how kids were killed by the United States on the first day of the war with Iran. AI was used to identify these specific. These kids were killed in a school that was initially, many years back, a military base or something of that nature. So it's not just technology used to spread, but technology used to actually commit these violences. And that's also very scary, right? Because in itself, AI can be taken at face value as good for us. But with this specific case, we can see how it is so removed from reality. And it is so mistaken. It makes so many errors. I mean, with us, with our marking, we see it all the time, and I think that's why a lot of my colleagues, right? And the last one, it's specifically this violence that we normalize through our Afrophobic attacks here in South Africa, right? Whereby if someone dies, speaking of hospitals, if someone dies who was trying to deliver a child at a hospital, we've normalized it so much that a woman died outside a hospital, was not allowed to come in. And we say it's because, but why didn't your country take care of you? But we are not able to identify the issue at the core, that we have become so used, we have normalized death so much that everyone just pushes it to a side. And I think it is intentional. I think that we find ourselves in this specific place because it's intentional to normalize the death of someone else. And that is a big problem, because once you start normalizing death, then we lose our humanity, because that means you do not see the other person as a human. So I don't know if it's something that is comment or if it's questions, but you can take it from there. Thank you, Prof.
All right, thank you very much. I managed to round up what Ntando said, and then what Prof. Busira said was saying maternal processes and other problem-solving matters, should they be considered as element of violence or not? And what Paseka is alluding to here is that why should we be able to be complacent when you normalize violence through technology, or should you use technology otherwise? Prof, over to you.
Thank you very much for your questions. They are very tough questions. But I think that's the point, isn't it? When I grew up, I grew up as a nerd, you know. And I like university spaces because they afford us the opportunity to debate and to discuss. And I truly believe that the university is a laboratory for ideas and experimentation, and that's why we come here. So that's why it's not that people outside the university don't think like the people in the university do, but we have a certain process to follow to ask questions. So that's why when an academic makes the same claims like somebody outside, we begin to ask questions, you know. Because we think, of course, you know, when you say divine is a God, it's true, but we have another way of determining whether divine is a God. So, but I think this is a really good space to have this debate. I'm just acknowledging and saying it's good, but thank you for your questions. I'm going to start with the last question because it's still fresh in my mind, in my head. And I think that the issues you raised are very important. I started off by talking about how hard it is to be in a place that has suffered violence and that fights against violence and that leads the world against violence, but to see the unveiling of violence. So we should be all worried, you know. We should be all worried, and I think that when protests are accompanied by indignation of others, it is something that we should not condone, and that we need to condemn in the strongest way possible. But it's also that we all, in this context, have to attend to the silences that we've ignored. And it is across, not just in South Africa, but across the African continent. I started off by raising how difficult it is to be a black person in the world and in Africa in particular. So, and it's something that we seem to just put on the back of our heads and we put on the side, and which is very, very important, One, we need to stop forcing people to leave their homes. We have to attend to the things which forces people to leave their homes. That's very important, that people don't leave their homes because they are forced to, And we have to create also a space where, and frameworks where people who want to leave their homes can leave their homes, I travel the world. When I go to particular countries, and I've spent on this continent, I spent months looking for a visa, and I go there, I'm struggling to cross, and there's somebody who just comes in, from elsewhere. So it's not just here, it's all across this continent. And I think thirdly, we really need to go back to now connecting to these two questions, the dignity that we say we have. When I go to Senegal, they say they have teranga, and I come to South Africa, they say they have Ubuntu. When I go, each place on this continent has something it calls a concept of humanity and interdependency. And I can tell you, having lived in many parts of this continent and working in many parts of this continent, just yesterday, Tunisia, people being beaten, You go the other day in Ghana, people standing up against others, all across. And it's always different. If it's not the ones from outside, it's the ones from inside. So, and we have to ask ourselves, we inherited a space which was constituted to serve a particular purpose. What do we want to do with it? That's very important. And that's why all this debate about extraversion is around, that when your entire life is aimed towards serving something else, then you have a challenge. And that relates to your question. I'm answering all of them connectedly, because for me, decolonization is about sovereignty. But decoloniality is going beyond sovereignty. So we stop at decolonization, because decolonization gives you control over your land. It invites you to the party, but a party that was never constituted for you. You become part of the global community, and you're excited that you have freedom, you have democracy, but you don't have liberation. And for me, decoloniality is about liberation. It's now really having to write yourself into the world and finding your purpose and existing for your purpose. And I think the thing about violence, this necropolitics, is the command-man is, and the command-man is a nervous condition. And the nervous condition is about continuity. And continuity is, for me, embedded in sovereignty. That when one becomes a sovereign state, one is just continuing, but it's just that you are acting on behalf of empire. It's you have control over your land, you have control over participating, you have control over your economy, but your entire purpose is still extraverted. You need decoloniality to move outside of that. And decoloniality is having to have a date with the colonial library. Because in the colonial library, you begin to ask lots of questions. What is power? What is the state? What is government? What's the border? What's the economy? What is all of this? So I do think it's that. And then he was asking, because I think that in decolonization, in decoloniality, we begin to rethink our relationship to blood, to murder, to horror, to death, My a local chief or king would tell me that when blood spills on the ground, it is a malediction for everyone. So once the blood has spilled on the ground, we have to find ways of healing the ground. So how did we move to a place where it's so easy to spill blood and we don't spend time to heal the ground? So, and that's why I make that difference between, there's so much blood spilled on this ground. What have we done to undo that? Our customs tell us that there are whole processes that we have to do when blood has been spilled. So, and I think we have to do that. But to do that, I think we should not end at decolonization. We need to take decoloniality. That's why I do that work. It's important for us to do that. And then it takes this. So I think in there it answers that question about who lives and who dies, and where we begin to now make hierarchies of who we should keep and who, because we shouldn't get there. You know, the human is the human, no matter how privileged they are in the hierarchy, but at the heart of them is blood, is air and other that we need to preserve, because it should not spill on the ground. And then the thing about violence, if we are inherently violent, my answer to it is no. you know, we are not inherently violent, but I think, and it's not that I think, research shows, I mean, psychologists can tell us, biologists can tell us. I'm an anthropologist, so I'm bound to tell you that these are all things that are socially constructed and all things that are created and become part of processes, you know. And why do I say that, you know, love can be activated in you, you know. How is it that somebody who loves someone turns up one morning to violate that same person? How is that possible? You know, and we have to ask those questions, those critical questions. So I can activate hate in you. I can also activate love in you, you know, at the same time. So we all have the capacities to love, to hate, to kill, to not kill. Just somebody needs to activate it in you. Something needs to activate it in you. And I think it is now those catalysts that we have to understand. How do you catalyze somebody to hate? How do you catalyze somebody to violate? How do you catalyze somebody to be violent? We can see that these same people do care for other people. These same ones, you know. How is it that they're able to care for A and not B? How is it that they get into a room and say, you, I will leave you, you, I'll kill you, you know? So I think there are forces, and I think it's our job as academics to respond to those questions, to spend time, instead of just making claims, to really find out what is happening so that we can then translate this into praxis. But because we live in a world of impatience where 150 words are more important than others, then we don't have the patience for that work. We just want 150 words so that we can end, you know. Yeah, I think that's the thing. We are not forced to be violent. I don't know. I did respond to the thing about the blue imperialism and Bluetooth. I work a lot on my work on technology and AI, and particularly on the original sin, is to attend to that, because I believe that Mudimbe helps us to understand that in the colonial library, and that embedded in the colonial library are things that we need to undo. But again, every state has its priorities. I do think that when a state decides that it's going to prioritize something, of course I have a challenge with the state, but I have a challenge with my own state. What are you prioritizing? When I go to places, people keep saying, we don't know what your interests are. I spend a lot of time trying to fight, but at the same time, I don't know. What is our foreign policy priority? Do you know? No, I think we do have, but it is not articulated enough so that we understand it, and then it becomes part and parcel of our everyday life. What is our national priority? You know, of course there are many. Like if you ask me, some people ask me, what is your national culture? I don't know. What are your national values? I don't know. It doesn't mean they don't exist. But for us to be able to build a world that is integrated, that people can come and we say, look, this is how you must act. We have to constitute that like many other countries are doing. So we can hold it. Otherwise, we get into this point where we perpetuate this violence over and over and over. Yeah. And now we are translating that into technology, because technology simply picks what is there. So if the information there is that you have a big head, the technology will give you a big head. You know, so yeah. Thank you. I think I...
Thank you very much. We'll be going for another round of questions, but before then, I just need to tip on what our professor said. Grotesque, strong word. Complexity, strong one. And banality of a discipline of power, another one. The dramatization of power in a spectacular manner is another one, beyond any room of the ontological ethics. So it goes on, do you really become ethical or non-ethical? That's not the question, but the question is, how do we become conscientizers in this situation? Prof, I've got a question. I'll lead the first one, and then that'll be Mebota to be the second one in the question. The first question goes like, coming from the ghetto of Fish, I'm still there. We had street corner parks. Those were the convergence rooms and discussion and plenary. But at the same time, they were adorned with the mottos and the mantras that we need to adopt and so on. They're still there in existence as part of it or not. Now, there, you learn to understand that if you are not eating, you will be eating. If you are not mobilizing or knocking, or responding to the knock on the door, then you get to be the victim. So in that way, how do we become contributors to the existence on planet Earth, not as correctors, but as living society? Thank you, Prof. Prof. Potter, you're next. Noted. Yes.
Thank you very much for a fascinating talk. I'm Natalie Swanpool. I'm from the Department of Anthropology and Archaeology. I also want to touch on this issue of technology and perhaps on the issue of ethics and the role of individuals. Because of what you were saying, particularly towards the end, it really, for me, crystallizes in, for example, what's coming out now about the training of AI models, using people, for example, in East Africa to look at violent, sexual, violent, murderous images. And they are busy doing the work to somehow make AI more useful and palatable for other people in the world who want to use it as a tool. In addition, even our phones or other electronic devices, their very existence, the material components that they're made of are in fact predicated on the violence in places like DRC and the mining practices. And so perhaps what is the ethical role of consumers who are making use of these tools in this world of violence, where even if it's not visible to you, in fact, that is what it's predicated. Thank you.
Prof, thanks very much. And then I'll take the third one from Prof. Kagata.
Thank you very much. You chose the most difficult click. Thank you, Prof. My name is Zetu Kagata. I would like to know, you seem to be decrying the fact that the academy, the imposed Western academy, is losing relevance. And I would like to know why should that be? Because ever since its imposition, this academy actually, as the people who were colonized are yet to reap its promised benefit. It continues to benefit the great-grandchildren of the colonizer, not us. And also there is something that our bodies know for sure, that when we're self-educated, we thrive. So why should we decry its decay? Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Zetu. I think Zetu is easier. Thank you. Okay. Prof, just round up the questions. It was one from myself, the ghetto street corner parks, and one from Prof. Botha about ethics and then individual training of the AI. And Prof. Zetu, it was more of the divine. Is that okay?
Thank you very much. Yes, I mean, these are difficult questions again. We are in the laboratory, so we need to continue thinking about this. I will start with the last question about the Western Academy. Africans are experts at cohabitation, and I think that decoloniality, at least for me, the project that I advance is one about cohabitation. It's not one of erasure, because the thing that we are trying to fight, the way it operates is through erasure. It occupies you and it doesn't give space for any other thing. So we cannot respond to it by doing the same. It's like when I see some countries, they say, oh, the South Africans are wanting to send us out. Then they wake up, oh, we must send out the South Africans, So I thought you were better. So how do you respond to it in the way you're responding? Every emancipatory project is seeking respect, is seeking dignity, is seeking a better cohabitation. When women stand up and say that this patriarchy must end and this misogyny must end, it's not because they want to build a world that's only women. It's because they want to cohabit and have a dignified and respectful and respectable cohabitation, And that's important, and it's a really difficult project. What we call Western is a framing of something that we imagine as pure and as fixed, but which is not pure and is not fixed. And as Mutimbe argued, the colonial library has become a very core part of our own being. It becomes very difficult to have to undo. And I often use the analogy of a virus and its host, which I learned during COVID-19. During COVID-19, you had to learn a lot. And that I learned that when a virus infects, it finds a host and infects the host, they have a codependent relationship. And you have to, if one eliminates the other one dies. Once that infection has happened, the relationship becomes codependent. So we are in this space where a universal project, the critique of universalism is that it introduces to the world one way. And the response to that, which is a pluriversal project, which allows for cohabitation. So I think when I talk about the diminution of the academy needs to be transformed. But the project of systematic inquiry is very important. However we transform the academy, having to have ways by which we can evaluate the process of having to collect information, the process of having to make claims, the process of having to support those claims is very important. And what we need is other modes of inquiry so that we can just juxtapose, because so far the argument is that we have centered one mode of inquiry, which is what we are calling Eurocentrism, and what we are calling Western academia. What we need is to expand the modes of inquiry. So I don't think that the academy should disappear. I think we cannot decolonize without the academy, and we cannot decolonize without the university. Having to understand this knowledge and having to develop other projects and processes to undo this knowledge and to redefine many of us don't know who we are, I always say that, when we were talking a lot about decolonization and people came, we need to slaughter our goat, we need to slaughter. In my home I can't slaughter. It's the head of the family, but a particular person. So I'm not allowed to slaughter. If I slaughter, it's a malediction, But it's very interesting. In the world in which I've come to find myself, my response to it is that I should do it. So we have to spend time to understand ourselves, but we can't do it through claims, and we also can't do it through the colonial library. So I do think the academy is important. And then the thing about technology, that's what I was talking about the original sin. The original sin of tech, which I think we need to spend time to understand, which is the sin of the creation and the sin of invention itself. That technology, particularly the AI technology. So if you look at the top billionaires are all from this space. So we are saying if you want to become rich tomorrow, do this thing and learn to accumulate so we create an unequal society. So you have lots of people who are trying to be inspired to become these billionaires and patent their stuff so that they can continue to deepen this unequal world, And then you have embedded in it, which is the colonial library, and the fact that first it is founded on Cartesian logic, on particular logics, and the ways we read the world. So can we build a technology that is informed by other logics apart from Cartesian logic? That's the challenge that I think that we have. And then embedded in it is also the question of toxic masculinity, Many of these technologies come from places done by men, but also men who come from dark places. So if you see all these companies, they were built in garages, in places where they didn't have to follow rules. So somehow we want to give them rules now, but they've learned to grow without rules. They thrive without rules. They thrive without ethics and lots of stuff. So we have that challenge it doesn't mean that it's not good. This is great innovation, but there's a lot of work to go in, to do that. I think that's where the ethics will come. But for that ethics to happen, it means we also need to understand who we are and what this technology does for us, in this space. And then lastly, which was a question about coming from the gate, is how do we become contributors to existence on the planet? We have to be better at being better humans. We just have to be better at being better humans. But I do think that universities play a very important role through the research they do. If we do good research, I think this research makes a big contribution to informing policies, practices, and others. We may ignore it, but the policy world, the civil society world, the corporate world depends on our work. When they want to justify something, they reference one of us. So if we don't do our work correctly, properly, if we don't spend time to deepen, to explore, to understand concepts, take patience to understand what this is, we are perpetuating this through our own incompetence, which I think we need to change. Yeah. That's how I will respond to your question. How do we contribute to this existence of the planet? We need to do better research.
Thanks indeed, Prof. Okay, just capturing on what you just said. This is the time of Macabre. The notes on technology and how re-spectularity of violence is existing within us on planet Earth. Good. Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, Prof. Northover, you are the first one. Okay. Thank my mentor, Memlesero, you are your second one. Yes.
Can I speak? May I go ahead?
Absolutely, go ahead, Prof.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. So we're in the Human Sciences College and that, and we're talking about violence in terms of humans and that. But the rest of the planet, the rest of the world is composed of non-humans, and the violence we're doing to nature, to plants, animals, and that is, well, yeah, it doesn't give much hope for us. And our violence to humans, I think, is really an extension to our violence to nature. So I'm concerned if we don't come to terms with that. And someone asked about how do we be better humans on this planet. So this whole debate was framed by sort of anthropocentric, human-centered concerns and that. But the violence to, as I say, the other inhabitants of this planet is astronomical. Yes, 80 billion animals are slaughtered in facilities on the planet each year. It's increased phenomenally since 1960s. And that doesn't include what we're doing to the oceans and the seas. And of course, you mentioned, and perhaps some people wouldn't have taken you seriously when you said you're facing extinction. But the sixth extinction event that we're living through is largely human-created. And it's not just humans against humans, it's humans against all the other inhabitants of the planet. So yeah, I don't know how to solve this problem. I'm vegetarian, tending towards vegan, for this reason, for the violence that we do to everything, which is why I won't join you for lunch, thank you. But I'm just pointing that out. If we want to be better humans, we have to think really deeply about it. Not just what we're doing to other humans, but what we're doing to all the denizens of the planet. Thank you.
Brother, thank you very much. Your mic is on. Melissa.
Morning, everyone. My name is Niskhol the Plank. I think, Prof, I am finding myself in a very complex situation. And a complex situation because of my age, where one navigates technology in a very different spectrum. I have seen how violent the use of technology can be, especially in the black body. You'd find a person being killed or a person dead, and the family doesn't even know that the person is dead, and the news are trending. And then, but you also find another aspect, especially in social media, because I think I'm very fascinated by the concept of social media, where people are now, because they can't afford psychologists, they create their own community of talking, of raising the issues that they're going through. Currently, we have the conversation around the polygamist that was written by Sunat around Jonas. Many women are coming out and saying, I'm married to a Jonas. Many people are coming out and saying, Jonas is my father. And for me, it is, how do we find ourselves conceptualizing technology in an African context, where actually as researchers, we go in and read these comments and sit and hear people's voices, because these cries are there, but they don't have the platform, and the only platform that they can use is social media, and they can talk amongst themselves. And I think I loved how you speak about the concept of violence being a generational inheritance, where for me, I always think about the concept of how from colonialism, apartheid, even COVID-19, we have not healed. We keep on sweeping the blood or the grief under the carpet. People buried their family members that they don't even know, or people buried people they don't know. People did rituals they don't even ascribe to. And the dead are talking, and we're finding ourselves in complex situations where we are having nods, where we are tired, where we are depressed as young people. And it's because we have not done epistemic healing. And when you get into that device and you switch on social media and you read what people are going through, I think it's something else, where you would cry and hear someone saying, I was raped by my uncle, I was raped by my father. But we then want to detach. So I find myself in very complex spaces when it comes to this use of technology. How does it benefit us, but also how do we see it as a violent tool as well? Thank you.
Siyabulela ke kaloku for the question asked. I'll round up. Prof. Novova said astronomical violence projected by human on humans and projected by humans on nature on planet Earth. That's what you are speaking about. And Memsako was actually raised the issue about complex psychological situation which is perpetuated and ferried by the violence of use of technology. Prof, over to you.
Just to say that I'm not an expert on violence. Yeah, but thank you for the questions. Every time I do a talk on decolonization, decoloniality, I always end with an anecdote from my father-in-law, who grew up in the Eastern Cape, and he always tells me the story of Tokoloshi, and he said that there was this family who moved into a neighborhood haunted by a Tokoloshi, and they tried everything to resolve and attend to the Tokoloshi. They did all. They raised their beds, they went to the river, they called in Mdanga, they called the pastor, they did everything. But the Tokoloshi was still activated and active. So they decided the only solution is to leave the house, So they packed up their stuff, rented a truck, and put everything in the truck, and waited just before nightfall, to leave. And they didn't tell anybody, because you don't know who sent this Tokoloshi. So just as they were locking the door and about to leave, a neighbor showed up. And the neighbor asked, "Neighbor, what is happening?" And the Tokoloshi screamed from the truck and said, "We are moving." So, my father-in-law always tries, when I ask him something and there's a challenge, he always tells me a metaphor or a proverb or a story. He won't tell me do it left, do it right. You have to deduce from it what you need to do. So the thing that we are confronted with is like a Tokoloshi. Coloniality is a Tokoloshi. Apartheid is a Tokoloshi. Patriarchy is a Tokoloshi. Hate is a Tokoloshi. So the thing we are confronted with is a Tokoloshi. And when you move, it moves with you. When you try to attend to it, it finds ways of escaping and it moves to you. So the question is, how do you live to ensure that the manifestations of the Tokoloshi do not become too harmful to you and too destructive to the point of having to kill you? So whether you're talking about this violence that we're speaking about, you're talking about this technology, or it is a Tokoloshi. And that's the challenge here. And the problem with the Tokoloshi is that you can also spend all your time blaming the Tokoloshi. You fail an exam, Tokoloshi, You didn't have kids, Tokoloshi, So it's got this thing. It is present, it is destructive, it is problematic, but you can also spend all your time blaming the Tokoloshi. So that's also why you need to invite something else, some witch doctors, some gangas, to come and investigate and see what is the nature of this Tokoloshi. What should I do? I need to do a sacrifice to my uncle, to my aunt, or something. You cannot take upon yourself to understand it. You need something else. And I think that's why we need the university. So people can say it's problematic, but we need it to be able to understand the nature of this Tokoloshi so that we can attend to what its various things are and find the kinds of solutions we need to find. And that's what I do, decoloniality and decolonial work. So the violence, technology is important. It is important. It is part of us. When I grew up, I couldn't use a calculator. Every morning, I tried to do arithmetic mental sums, and I needed to calculate. If I failed one, the teacher gave me a knock on my head, or whip my bum or something. I had to do mental sums for, I think, close to 14 years of my life, And if you used a calculator, you were punished for cheating. Today, you cannot do maths without a calculator. We found a way to insert it in our work in a way that makes it ethical, but that does not allow people to cheat. That's the challenge we are faced with. We cannot have an easy solution. And also, as I said before, we don't know what African is. We have the discourse of Africa. We don't know what it is. You know, lots of people tell me, oh, you know, the first university was in Africa. You know, that these universities you're talking about, the first one was in Timbuktu. On the one side, yes. On the other side, really? You know, because when you call Timbuktu a university, which I'm not saying we shouldn't, you are not allowing for other forms of organizing knowledge to inform the world. You're stopping us from understanding what it was, you know. By really understanding it in the way it is, we are able to contribute to the world some other way of organizing knowledge, learning, and engaging without necessarily following the process that we are. But we are so bent on extroversion that all our life is to prove that we had a university. Yeah, so, and I think that's part of the challenge, the technology, the African context, conceptualizing, sweeping it. We need to be open. And when we are open, I think we're going to find the solutions that you are talking, having people to study, having people to understand us, that will help us. And then the thing about bias, yes, when I talk about human, I started off the first by talking about extinction, and that this extinction is not only about nature. That's very important. Nature, what we call, we are a tiny little part of nature. I know people talk, I grew up farming, it's in my body. You know, it's Anne Foster's telling who talks about the bare bones of sex, and that when you do archaeological work, you can see the violence of people in their body. If you read my body, it's all farming, all over. You know, the machete which cut me, the grass that pulled me, when I can see it in your arms, you know? So, and it's interesting. It's not just the animals that we see. It's the microbes. That when you have a little spinach, under the leaves of that spinach, and also are lots of different micro insects which inhabit the world. So even if we also don't treat that spinach ethically, we are still committing violence. Because now the one that is spectacular we are trying to stop, but the one that is not spectacular we are trying to avoid, you know. Whether it is in a fruit or in a worm that's there, it's an ecosystem that involves everyone. And we have to be conscious of not just the human, but that nature. But here, I'm hoping that emphasizing this particular one about the human and this particular violence contributes also to that. Because that we cannot ignore. At all. I don't know if I think I answered both questions. Nature is very important, animals are very important, climate is very important, and this project which allows us to just destroy, I call it the project of concretization. Decolonization, colonization and coloniality is about the concrete. You come to the Congo forest, you say these people are primitive, you cut down the trees and you put concrete buildings. You say Johannesburg is the best cities because you have concrete buildings. You know, you move, so this colonization and coloniality is a project of concretization. So for decoloniality to happen, we have to start asking, how do we live with nature? You know, but it means seeing it completely, not just as animals, but as leaves, as microbes, as others, because they all contribute to the ecosystem. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I now release you. You can go, Prof. Thank you very much. I just need to say thanks to the question that came through now from Prof. Novova and from Ma'am Lesego. I think what Prof is saying, spectacular or non-spectacular violence, violence is violence, whether to the spinach leaf or not, but it is there. So consideration is to be there. There's concrete evidence that violence is violence. Dear colleagues, allow me at this very moment to call to stage Mekileba Mang Mukubi to come with Prof. Puleng Sehalo to be the one who? Oh, Prof. Madise. Okay. Prof. Madise, erratum, of course it happens, and then correction, even the newspaper does that. Prof. Madise, you've been cued in. Your role is to become my role, become direct the program. You're here to present a gift, Mem Kilabamong will issue to you. Prof, would you please approach the podium?
I've been actually requested by the committee, the Africa Speaks committee, to bring this gift to you. And with this gift, we are actually saying thanks for the lecture. And I suppose it's not the end of it, that tomorrow we'll be able to also ask you to come and speak further. I mean, the world today has become too violent. We also see cyber attacks also coming in. People no longer go to war physically, that in the past they used drones, they use all of those things. And from what I saw with people asking questions, actually it was basically saying there's a bit of a concern, or maybe a much concern, not a bit of a concern. It can be a bit of a concern because it's from this smaller group. But it could also be a universal concern in terms of where the world is going with so much violence. When are we going to actually reduce the amount of violence that we see going around? And with that, I want to say this is from the college to you, and thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much for the activity that just took place, which is an exchange of a gift, which is African, which is more of the concept that we are talking to. I think, Prof, what you need to take home is the interpretation of the artwork that you just received, the significance of the colors, the spherical shape of the design. Just ask more, I'm the person. Thank you. All right, there's a very moment of truth. Me mabafuking hoyani ke kopotlo pele kwano tota. We are going to be receiving a vote of thanks from a researcher in the Chief Albert Lituli Research Ice Ring. Thank you.
Dumelang bagolo. To Prof. Zethu Nkosi, our guest, Prof. Divine 4, College Management Committee, Prof. Onyancha, Prof. Madise, colleagues from Unisa, guests from other institutions, participants joining us on Teams and YouTube, students, good afternoon. Well, it's 4 minutes to afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Mabafuking Hoyani. I'm a researcher, as Doc has mentioned, at the Chief Albert Lituli Research Chair, and I've been requested to give the vote of thanks on behalf of the Africa Committee, behalf of Africa Speaks Committee. Firstly, I'd like to extend a word of gratitude to Prof. Nkosi and the college management for their support in keeping this lecture series alive. our speaker, Prof. Divine for agreeing to come and deliver the second Africa Speak lecture of 2026. Thank you for sharing your research work with us, Prof. Can we please give him a round of applause again? To the organizing committee, thank you for your dedication and making sure this lecture happens. I know at times it's not easy to secure speakers, but you never lose hope. To Ms. Kileba Mamukhupi, thank you for your leadership. You've always made sure that the mandate of the college is realized. Your chair as the committee diligently and always provide guidance, proper guidance with us. Thank you so much. Can we please give her, because behind the scenes she does most of the work. Our program director, thank you for agreeing to drive the program today. You just joined the committee and you have gotten baptism of fire. Oskileba Mansera must say that to you, Prof. To Ms. Lerato Maluleka, thank you for assisting with the admin work, CC. You are truly appreciated. Participants, thank you for the time you took to be here engaging in the discussion. It wasn't an easy theme, as we have realized. We're in turbulent times as a continent, as a country. It's June, everyone is as nervous and anxious. And thank you, Prof, for actually covering this theme for today. Thank you to the multimedia, catering, and conferencing staff. If it was not because of the Multimedia Center, we would have not been able to connect with colleagues outside Pretoria. Lastly, you are all welcome to a post-lecture seminar that will be delivered tomorrow by Prof. Divine, which will be at the Department of Anthropology and Archaeology. Venue is on the 4th floor. At the museum, Archaeology and Anthropology Museum at the Winnie Madikizela building. And it's what time, Ganen? 8? 10. Yes, at 10. So on the 4th floor at the museum. And in that, Bahulu Bame, mine was an easy one. Thank you so much. And lunch is served. Thank you.
Wow, thanks. It's not necessary for me to be here, but I just need to say thank you very much for being a good audience and participants. And I just need to say thanks for the presenters for respecting the protocol that was presented before us, especially in the Cordell institution that Unisa is. Thank you very much, colleagues. I think Meba Fuking has just run it all. May we die. Thank you.